can't tell you exactly what year it is, because we honestly don't know.
Welcome to MINDSHOCK. This is your host, Bruce McGuire. And this is one of the most definitive podcasts on the true history of the world. The real history of the world. Can it actually be known? And we will be diving deep in typical MINDSHOCK fashion with all of the evidence and references for altered history, fabricated history, missing years, adding years. Does the entire narrative, force-fed and indoctrination facilities, actually hold any kind of water? And attempting to make sense of the years, timelines, resets, disasters, Tartaria, mud flood, everything in a single podcast. I've done the definitive Tartaria podcast, but I want to expand actually further above and beyond Tartaria and see where Tartaria fits into all of this. Is it the missing piece? Maybe, maybe not. And if there is a major missing piece, for example, if the Great Flood of Noah was actually the mud flood, and it happened a couple hundred years ago, and the continents were different, were laid out differently, and as a result of the cataclysm, the continents fractured, and that's what accounts for differences in maps and lands and all of that. Would that explain the narrative? And then we're going to take it even further. And was it simply Tartaria versus, was Tartaria the powers that be? The old world order? Or was Tartaria fighting the old world order, or what became the new world order? And here's a key that I don't see anybody talking about anywheres. What if there were rogue factions among both the Tartarians and the old world order, the powers that be, whatever? If there were rogue factions, and these are all worldwide civilizations fighting with each other in many colonies, on worldwide colonies, in continents that may have been laid out somewhat differently, and then there could have been advanced tech used. Now, to all the coincidence theorists, the authority-worshipping cultist bootlickers who are immediately going to be spamming appeal to incredulity fallacies due to their mental weaknesses, we will be providing all receipts in typical MINDSHOCK fashion with logic and reason at the forefront here, as always. And if you want to help logic and reason return to a world where it's quickly going extinct, as evidenced by the amount of goofs who actually believe the mainstream narrative. Again, I don't claim anything is true or untrue, but blind faith is obviously not logical. You can donate to our PayPal. Check the link in the description. Make sure you're subscribed, like, and share. Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, and Patreon. Patreon is a great priority for case topic, logical analysis, podcast, or requests. You could also be a guest on the podcast depending on your tier. Questions, comments, theories, thoughts, suggestions, rebuttals, debunkings of any kind, leave them in the comments section. And you can also support the podcast by being a YouTube member right here on YouTube. And of course, you could also, if you're here with us live, drop any thoughts in the live chat. I'll try to go over all of it. So, for the uninitiated, for those who have never even heard of Tartaria, mud flood theories, and any of this stuff, let's outline this. Let's look at the evidence of the fakery first, and then we'll be going into a deep dive. Now, for those that don't know, stolenhistory.org is an invaluable resource in documenting all of the issues with the official narrative, because a lot of the coincidence theorists they'll say, oh, well, if there really was a mud flood or some other kind of war against Tartarians or this Tartarian Empire, people around would have known, and they would say something. They can't burn all the books. Well, what again, in these logical spamming goofs, what they fail to realize is, yes, of course they can't burn them all. That's why there's people going over these books and references like we will be doing. I'll put them all on the screen. And so, yeah, they can't get rid of everything. So there will be evidence of the fakery and the rewriting. Second of all, what a lot of goofs don't realize is nobody's talking about events transpiring that nobody knew about. The conspiracy here is that the events that people do know about, like world wars, etc., the reason they were happening were for other reasons than reported on the idiot box or in the controlled newspapers or whatever. Now, how would an average commoner, regardless of whether they were participating in the military, whether they were just, being a mercenary for their state, for the government, how would they actually know if there was a group of string pullers manipulating these governments for other purposes? I mean, how would they know? They wouldn't know. But coincidence theorist goofs, they just don't have the mental capacity. They don't have the basic critical thinking skills, not to believe this stuff, but to just consider these possibilities. Because if the entire world... yes, Flat Bob, we are here live. If it says live, we're live. If it's a premiere, it's not live. Okay. So, welcome, Duckin' Felonies, south to west. The fall enslaves us all. Flat Bob. Yeah, so... the capacity here, this has been a long time in the works, and there's a little bit of overlap with King Arthur, but I'm going to save the King Arthur stuff for a different one. Welcome, Andrew, as well. They can't consider, like, if this entire world is some kind of set, all the world's a stage, if it's some kind of set and part of the game for the true rulers of the world, or those who claim the right to rule, the powers that be or the powers that shouldn't be, as some people in the chat have said. Welcome, Christopher Allen. If part of the setup is to, artificially create these governments and countries to pit people against each other, I mean, how would anybody know? Like, the expectation of coincidence theorists, like these hallucinated expectations are just mind-boggling, mind-shocking. Duck and Felony says, I've been trying to figure out World War II, but there's so many conflicting stories. Everything I was taught is baloney. Okay, you want me to... Okay. I believe I believe I've put in enough hours where I can succinctly summarize WW2. Who wants to hear it? I think I might be able to do it in 1 or 2 sentences. Challenging as it may be. Alright, here it is. Everybody's got their ears perked up. Hopefully I don't get shut down for this one. Okay. Let me say it this way. World War II was not an isolated event. It was in a series of events. And within the modern era, and we'll be getting into the whole stage of history and all of history in a moment, but in the modern era, and I'm not going to go through the receipts here. I've provided all the receipts for what I'm about to say here. Hitler was a British agent, either being used knowingly or unknowingly in an MK Ultra Tavistock operation. His banker was a British New World Order Illuminati bankster who bankrolled all of it. One of Hitler's right-hand men was a British agent, and Hitler himself placed in Britain by, I believe, was it his sister-in-law? I provided all the receipts for this with photographs in one of the lives. I'll have to clip it. I'm not going to go through all of that here. So he was used as a pawn, either knowingly or unknowingly, to sacrifice Germany. There was no actual, by the corrupt powers that be, there was no actual possibility that they were going to win. he was a sacrificial lamb in a staged setup to collapse the only country in Western and Central Europe not belonging to the banksters. And the German people were sacrificed as such. And all of their cities bombed after the military had already left. And that was part of a larger operation to set an example. Not just set an example, but to clear out a lot of this old world order Tartaria evidence. So there's again, if you can think beyond basic black and white, the powers that be, why would they only have one goal? Obviously, if you have any kind of brain power, you're going to try to be efficient in some kind of way. You're going to want to check a few different boxes. For the people who found what I just said shocking, I actually don't remember which live Q&A I went over this theory. And it gets even deeper, too, where the Bush family were actually Germans in Germany, photographed with Mengele and some of these other officials. So, yeah, there's plenty of evidence for all of this. And I provided all. This is one of the few times I'm not going to put the receipts right on the screen because this is not the subject for that here. But whoever was here for the live, I did bring up all the receipts for that. Natalia Mock says Poland was not part of the banking system either. Which year? Because some of this went back to WW1 as well. And then there's overlap here. Let's actually get right to this and the real history of the entire world, because I actually think it's impossible to understand a single conflict without looking at the overarching implications across the entire world. And yeah, make sure you're not just listening to this, because there's going to be a lot of visual aids here that I don't believe anybody has ever compiled in the fashion that I have. And it'll make it as easy to understand as possible, because we're going to be looking across all major conflicts and their years, and the coincidence stack that's going to result of some of these wars happening the exact same year in different parts of the world, if there is no single worldwide operation, which I think the evidence will clearly show that there is, and there actually is one conflict that's a smoking gun, and it's not WW2. Yeah, Flapop says they're trying to say Russia isn't under the Rothschilds' thumb now, but I don't buy it. Pretty much everyone but Iran and North Korea have their monetary system in place. I'm actually not sure. See, how much can we trust what has been said about Iran and North Korea anyway? I actually don't trust anything about anything. Obviously, burden of proof is on positive claims. I think pretty much everything is under general control. However, there's warring factions under the surface, and they might just, I believe, just like it's always been in the past, and that's why it's so difficult to piece some of this together, because I don't think it's as simple as Tartaria versus XYZ. I think there's rogue factions on both sides of all these wars, and that's what's creating some of this. And again, rogue faction doesn't even necessarily mean they know the truth about all the conflicts at the top. Christopher says George Bush Sr.'s dad was Mustache Man's banker. There are pictures of them together. It was the Tavistock guy, actually. Wait, I don't believe that's George Bush Sr.'s dad. I think that's a different guy. The Fallen Slaves Us All says, I love visual aids. Yeah, I even have time lapses. It's all coming. It's all coming, and we're starting right now. Plachi Podcast says, I watched a video about Lost Land comp to Jesus from that girl. Have you managed to get in touch with her? I haven't yet, but this is actually going to tie in with that. I don't know if I should tease it yet. No, let's do it organically. We'll get to it. But the reason why I was so fascinated by that is because I didn't even know exactly how much that would factor into the true history of the world. But yeah. Flat Bob says, everyone in the club fighting each other for position and power, dog eat dog world. Yeah, I don't know about that. That's the thing, Flat Bob. I think there's, unless you're talking about a club and a sub-club, people in the sub-club are doing that. But at the top club, I don't think that's what's going on. And let's get right to it. So stolen history, a lot of this is going to be, full credit to Stolen History for compiling a lot of this stuff. And I'm just trying to parse it with combining other informations in a concise fashion so it's super easy to understand, or as easy to understand as possible. So one of the best posts here, because there's literally hundreds if not thousands of posts on this forum, so it's kind of impossible, especially for a newbie, to navigate all this. I'm going to go back to November 7th, 2020. This post here, and some of these are like copy pasted, so I don't know if this is the moderator Corbin Dallas, going by Corbin Dallas, and there's a whole conspiracy about Stolen History as well, because it actually was taken down and then recovered. Some people think now it's controlled, but either way, we examine information for its own veracity, not spamming genetic logical fallacies. So we will examine it as it is, and I believe some of the archive is accurate, because it seems that, again, to my memory, it has not been changed. So the post is here. Question, so the hypothesis here is mutiny in the sky or a short history of the world. So this is going to lay the foundation for people new to Tartaria, Mudflood, etc. And then we're going to actually go into what year it actually is, and if it can be calculated, and then we'll be going into some of the empires. So a lot of, we kind of have to go over all of this information to see how it ties together with all the conflicts of the world, and I believe only viewing it in its totality, because you can't, if you're looking at only a few different little puzzle pieces in the middle, like for example, if World War II is like 4 puzzle pieces, they might not even, you might be missing one, so you can't even connect them properly. But it's a 10,000 piece puzzle, so you're not really going to know how it fits into anything anyway. Even if you can maybe accurately figure out what happened during those years, you're not going to know why, you're not going to know the bigger picture. So that's what we're trying to do here, is to piece it absolutely everything together. So let's start off with a major mind shock here. And I've actually talked about this in the past, and the reason why I was kind of shocked by this post is it ties a lot together, which we're going to do right now. So buckle up, people. Buckle up. This might actually end up being the most mind-shocking podcast I've ever done. So, yeah, make sure you're buckled up. Hold on to your hats, folks. So, between 2008 and 2011, British scientists have created more than 150 human-animal hybrid embryos. So, yeah, we can go through all the sources here. I'll just throw up one link first. But for the people that have been following this, this is not new information, and I've brought this up so many times before. If Dolly cloned became public information in the 90s, what were they doing in previous decades? If not centuries, if not millennia. So, again, a lot of people spam genetic and ad hom fallacies regarding dailymail.co.uk. But how many times have their stories been proven correct? And again, this is not the only, link. I don't know, even the most devout coincidence theorists are going to be questioning this in 2025. I know there was a lot of questioning when, in the previous decade or two, people were saying it's not all the goofs were saying it's not possible, this or that, as if they would know, as if they work in all these labs pushing all this stuff. But, yeah, this is not new information for people that have been following genetic modification here. I mean, China, this was front page news in many newspapers about China making some kind of pig human hybrid embryos, etc. So if they're admitting the embryos, What exact? And this is Newcastle University. I mean, we're not talking about secret labs on islands somewhere like Warwick University, Newcastle University. I mean, these are universities and research centers that are not underground and in other countries like they were in the 90s, because that was actually news that they passed some kind of legislation against human cloning or whatever, so it was being done, on islands and not within government, by private companies. Obviously, the government was conducting their own in their top secret laboratories. But, yeah. And for the people who are not going to understand where all this is going, just bear with me. It's all going to tie together in the most mind-shocking fashion imaginable. Plachi Podcast says, for me, I'm starting to think they stole about 1,000 years, and Tartaria is basically part of the biblical story, and they changed the narrative about giants, making them look evil. Human-animal hybrids were happening in Atlantis, according to Edgar Casey readings. Lock Smart 3209 dropping that bomb. I don't even remember that specifically from Edgar Casey. But, yeah, I'm not going to get into Atlantis too much here, although it is relevant, and we'll talk about it a little bit. But this is mostly going to be about the past couple hundred years and how, again, I'll drop a little bit of foreshadowing here, perhaps the Bible is not talking about events thousands of years ago, but hundreds of years ago. And a further theory, perhaps there were no prophecies, simply descriptions of what already happened. And we'll be getting into that as well with receipts. With receipts. Mananoint says, in the Bible it says you have to be born of water to enter the kingdom of heaven. That got me thinking, because apparently you can be born without it. So maybe this cloning thing isn't something new. There's nothing new under the sun, is there? Alright. So there's another report here from Business Insider, also on the same thing, regarding British scientists creating more than 150 kind of human animal hybrids. I can just imagine the coincidence theorist cope that's going to be coming as a result of all of this. But again, there's no shortage of receipts here. I'm not going to go through a million of them here. But here's just a few. And again, if they're admitting to the embryos, what kind of stuff do they really have? So this was all the way back between 2008 and 2011. Again, so yeah. So here's another bombshell here. There was an article here, 2024, military is developing a helmet that will allow fighter pilots to maneuver their jets and fire weapons just by thinking about it. This is Popular Mechanics by Sebastian Roblin, published October 25th, 2024. So, yeah, the amount of tech they admit to. So you have to always look, in what year is it admitted? Or at least the research on it admitted. So we can kind of extrapolate, perhaps 50 years prior it's already been developed. That seems to be the MO. It's kind of just a rule of thumb people have come up with. Brian Cash says, Jesus already came back and reigned for 1,000 years. We are now in Satan's little season. Repent, the end is near. Maybe. But let's get a little bit more specific as exactly to the events of all of that. So the post here also references the secret archives of the Vatican, the vat of sin, known as the Vatican. And what kind of archives I believe if all of that information were to be released, I think they actually do have it. Enough to piece it together, but we might actually be able to piece it together without that. There might be enough clues without that. So let's see what we can do here. So, disclaimer number 1. If you can decipher every single riddle from the second dream vision of Enoch, you do not need to read anything below, other than the 19th century. So let's go over that real quick. So this is the history of the world to the founding of the Messianic kingdom. The Book of Enoch, claimed here by R.H. Charles, 1917. And after this I saw another dream, and I will show the whole dream to thee, my son. And Enoch lifted up his voice and spake to his son Methuselah, to thee, my son, I will speak. Hear my words, incline thine ear to the dream vision of thy father. Before I took thy mother Edna, I saw in a vision on my bed, and behold, a bull came forth from the earth, and the bull was white. And after it came forth a heifer, and along with this came forth 2 bulls, one of them black, the other red. And that black bull gored the red one and pursued him over the earth, and thereupon I could no longer see that red bull. But that black bull grew, and that heifer went with him, and I saw that many oxen proceeded from him, which resembled and followed him. And that cow, the first one, went from the presence of the first bull in order to seek the red one, but found him not, and lamented with a great lamentation over him, and sought him. And I looked till that first bull came to her, and quieted her, and from that time onward she cried no more. And after that she bore another white bull, and after him she bore many bulls and black cows. And I saw in my sleep that white bull likewise grow and become a great white bull, and from him proceeded many white bulls, and they resembled him. And they began to beget many white bulls, which resembled them, one following the other, many. That's curious. Okay. So so these disclaimers are just from the forum article here. So this is a conceptual approach. I will use some conventional dates, but those will primarily be used to visualize hypothetical timelines. I believe that the Bible, including various sources of other religions, is a watered-down version of the world history. This version was completely stripped of the technological aspect, with only spiritual and ethical aspects remaining. So, note 1, I do not like using biblical text, but we're going to start off with times requiring us to use the scripture, no matter how convoluted, but these are some of the few pieces of information pertaining to the distant past we can lean on. I understand that the question of credibility will always be up in the air. Note 2, the Book of Enoch is an apocryphal text and is not part of the traditional biblical canon, yet it is part of Ethiopian canon. Enoch, the son of Jared and the father of Methuselah, was the 7th generation from Adam. Noah was Enoch's great-grandson, making Enoch Noah's great-grandfather. So let's keep this in mind. If the Bible is representing events that happened hundreds of years ago, again, we're not talking about believing anything. This is MINDSHOCK. I do not claim anything is true or untrue. The motto here, of course, is the only thing we know for sure is that we don't know anything for sure. But if these events occurred far more in the recent past, Enoch is Noah's great-grandfather. So, her field from the, On why the Book of Enoch was removed, one Mr. Hartfield states the Book of Enoch was accepted by the 2nd and 3rd century church fathers as Clement of Alexandria and Tertullian, although Tertullian mentioned that some rabbis would not accept it. Enoch was mentioned in the Epistle of Jude, and it can be seen that some of the gospel material may have been based on it. Following the Council of Nicaea in 325 CE, the Book of Enoch became sidelined and was eventually banned by late 4th century and early 5th century theologians such as Jerome and Augustine. There have never been this is coming from Harfield, there have never been giants on Earth. It is true that Neanderthal men, of which hundreds of skeletons have been found, were massively stronger than modern humans, but they were also shorter in stature. The last thing any scientist would do on finding evidence of giants on Earth would be covered up, since the very fact of discovering evidence of giants would make him famous. And again, I don't know who this Harfield is, but this goof's hallucinating that people didn't try to make it public, or that they did make it public and then they were silenced. I mean, that's how conspiracies work. The people that have all the power don't need to be famous, and they don't want to be. And they silence those that do. I mean, I don't know who this Harfield is that's being quoted here, but he sounds like a goof. Okay. So, let's continue the outline here. 1. Space-time Earth. Our perception of space and time is very important in maintenance psyop, meant to provide for a non-existent reality. The purpose is to instill a false understanding of the fundamentals of this world. Space. We are provided with the concept of the infinite universe. The concept is supported by unverifiable images of galaxies, quote, far and far away. Scientism cultist warning here. This is going to be rough for the scientism cultists. Space reality. We cannot get a normal photograph of the Earth or a live camera pointed to Earth on the moon. I could add 50 more of these can't do's. Those you should know for yourself, and I'm not going to get into all the alleged moon landing and all of that, but yes. They couldn't even live stream in the alleged 2024 Artemis landing, which they couldn't even make it a manned landing. Couldn't even get a live stream, let alone drop a camera to live stream from Earth to the moon. Time. We are provided with the concept of some unfathomable and unverifiable timetables. Here I mean things like our Big Bang Theory, and it's 13.8 billion years old. Here I'm talking about the dinosaur concept, and it's 65 plus millions of years. We are given Darwinism, ancient Egypt, Greece, and Rome to extend our history into an indiscernible dot in reality. Time, reality. We do not know who built buried tunnels. Referencing here specifically the Williamson tunnels of Liverpool. But of course there's tunnels all over the world, and then there's claimed builders, but regarding definitive evidence. But the Liverpool tunnels are quite incredible. And yeah, I mean, obviously there are claims as to who built what when, but can it be verified? That's why all of these questions exist by conspiracy theorists, aka critical thinkers. So there's, of course, thousands and thousands, if not tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of miles of tunnels all over the world, under every city, etc., etc. Was it built before the city? Again, these are all questions, and the burden of proof is on positive claims. So we do not know what event dumped 20 feet of dirt on our 19th century cities. So for those familiar with mud flood and all of that, apparently there were plenty of events where this happened. I'm not going to get into it right this second. We're just laying the foundation. I'll be getting into a lot of that a little bit later. Earth, we are provided with the concept of the Earth structure. We are given crust, mantle, and 2 cores. None of these are verifiable. Earth reality, we have only seen the crust. World famous 40,230 feet deep Kola super deep borehole is the deepest we have ever gone into Earth, allegedly. It took almost 20 years to reach 7.5 miles, only half the distance or less to the mantle. 2. Artificial Earth. The Earth was artificially created. The Earth is a limited access terrarium. Its inhabitants think they are free. Its inhabitants believe they are the top of the food chain. The Earth was created using some advanced scientific approach. This type of science is above and beyond what we are capable of accepting or comprehending at this moment. This scientist is commonly referred to as the God, supreme being, creator, deity, etc. Any sufficiently advanced tech is indistinguishable from magic, said by Arthur C. Clarke. 3. The Earth model. The Earth is either an enclosure on a much bigger body or a standalone object. The surface we live on is flat. The shape of the entire object, commonly referenced to as a planet, is unknown to us. Again, unless you're citing to faith and fallacy. Currently, I'm leaning towards one of the below 2 models. Either way, there is a dome. And just a quick point here. A lot of people argue the flat versus globe debate. Is that all a distraction from getting people to look at Tartaria and the history of the world? Because that'll get you closer to the truth. I mean, the shape, regardless of what the true shape is, obviously, I don't make any such claims. All the triggered goofs spiraling here. But, yeah, perhaps the powers that be are perfectly content to have people stuck on flat versus globe debates to avoid looking further. Because further is where the deeper truths would lie. Welcome, James Brown. Great musician there. Currently, I'm reading this from Stolen History. These are not my words at the moment. Currently, I'm leaning towards one of the below 2 models. Either way, there is a dome. I don't see what his proof for that is here, though. In reality, the shape is irrelevant. It's just nice to know what it is. Relevant is the reason the shape is being hidden from us. I would argue both are relevant. 4. Sun, moon, and stars. The sun, moon, and other planets and stars are not what we are traditionally taught they are. They are parts of the Earth's clockwork mechanism providing for the support of the environment within our enclosure. There is a description of how it could work provided, allegedly, by Enoch. It will require a sharp person to figure out how everything works in there. So these from Enoch, and I saw 6 portals in which the sun rises and 6 portals in which the sun sets. And the moon rises and sets in these portals, and the leaders of the stars and those whom they lead, 6 in the east and 6 in the west, and all following each other in accurately corresponding order. Also many windows to the left and right of these portals. So who can decipher that? That's a little tough, isn't it? That's kind of tough. 5. The scientist or scientists, aka the god. The creators had a military-type structured organization, as in they had their own hierarchy. Once again, the Book of Enoch provided the clues. As we know from the King James Bible, Genesis 6:2-6:4, so 6:2, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, and that they were fair, and they took them wives of all which they chose. 6:4, there were giants in the earth in those days. That's also curious. In the earth, not on the earth. And also after that, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them, the same became mighty men, which were of old, men of renown. And I'm going to drop a major mind shock here that's going to lay some fundamental groundwork for understanding everything that's going to come forth here. So, instead of something so simple, like, let's not commit reductive logical fallacies here, as in all of the, some of these major cities all over the world with similar architecture, with this Greco-Roman style architecture, they were simply found by people. What if they could have been created by, who knows how far back these goes, demigods, fallen angels, whatever, Nephilim, hybrids, whatever, giants, and then another generation passed, there was another reset, and they were inherited or found by yet others, either other hybrids or whatever. And then there was another reset. Again, I'm not claiming ages here. I have no idea. 100 years, 200 years, 500 years, 1,000 years, 10,000 years. And then the recent finding was not the first finding. And that was by simple humans. And they may have also found tech left over. And that leftover tech might have actually been tech imitating previous tech. So with each reset, the technology gets more primitive as we understand it. Okay, let's continue here. Hopefully everybody got that point. So basically that's what we get out of the Bible. The book of Enoch chapter 6 has a more detailed explanation. 1, and it came to pass that when the children of men had multiplied, that in those days were born unto them beautiful and comely daughters. 2, and the angels and the children of heaven saw and lusted after them, and said to one another, Come, let us choose us wives from among the children of men, and beget us children. 3, and Semjaza, who was their leader, said unto them, I fear ye will not indeed agree to this deed, and I alone shall have to pay the penalty of a great sin. 4, they all answered to him and said, Let us all swear an oath, and bind ourselves by mutual imprecations, not to abandon this plan, but to do this thing. 5, then swear they all together and bound themselves by mutual imprecations upon it. 6, and they were all 200 who descended in the days of Jared on the summit of Mount Hermon, and they called it Mount Hermon because they had sworn and bound themselves by mutual imprecations upon it. 7, and there are the names of the leaders: Semyazaz, their leader, Arakiba, Ramel, Kokabiel, Tamiel, Ramiel, then the other one is Ramiel, Denel, Ezekiel, Barakiel, Azael, Armaros, Batarel, Amanel, Zakiel, Samasapiel, Satarel, Turel, Jumjael, Sariel. The 8, these are their chiefs of tens. Again in chapter 7, these are the names of their chiefs. These were perfect of the 200 angels, and the remainder were all with them. Later, in the time of the judgment of the book of Enoch, chapter 68 provides the following info on their hierarchy. 1, after this judgment they shall be astonished and irritated, for it shall be exhibited to the inhabitants of the earth. 2, behold the names of these angels. 3, these are the chiefs of their angels, and their names of the leaders of their hundreds, and the leaders of their 50s, and the leaders of their 10s. So no wonder the book of Enoch is not part of the Bible. A 200-strong Watcher-class battalion of angels. So just a quick, this is right from the wiki regarding the Watchers from the Book of Enoch. These are the rogue Watchers. So these angels are dispatched to Earth to watch over humans. They soon begin to lust for the human women, and at the time, and the prodding of their leader, Samyaza, defect to illicitly instruct mankind and procreate among them, arriving Mount Hermon. The offspring of these unions are the Nephilim, savage giants who pillage the earth and endanger humanity. Samyaza and his associates further taught their human charges arts and tech such as weaponry, cosmetics, mirrors, sorcery, and other techniques that would otherwise be discovered gradually over time by humans, not foisted upon them all at once. Eventually, God allows a great flood to rid the earth of the Nephilim, but first sends Uriel to warn Noah as to not eradicate the human race. The Watchers are bound in the valleys of the earth until Judgment Day. Very curious. And so there's actually quite a few non-Enoch references as well. So, yeah, that's curious. I'm not going to go through all of them. In the Kabbalah, the Zohar makes reference to the Watchers of the Nebuchadnezzar's dream. And again, that happens to be the name of the ship in the Matrix as well. So, of course, you would have the good Watchers and then the bad Watchers. And I think we need to remember that, not to fall into these false dichotomy logical fallacies, because I think some of the same thing might have happened all throughout history. But the technological aspect here is quite fascinating. So there were 4 companies of 50 angels, and that was broken down into 20 squads of 10 angels. And also what's curious is they're making this oath as if being bound by an oath, there's some kind of laws of the universe that even Watchers cannot escape. Because the leader, or supposedly, I don't know how this all breaks down, but the battalion commander, Samyaza, says, I fear ye will not indeed agree to do this deed, and I alone will have to pay the penalty of a great sin. And they respond that they are all bound together, as if there are certain laws of the universe that even the Watchers cannot escape, fallen angels or not. Which is curious. So that means that there are laws of the universe that nobody can escape, perhaps, except for I don't know, how it was created. And because some people say, well, why does, whatever, the Illuminati use all this symbolism, you can't violate human free will, etc. Perhaps that's them trying to get around the laws of the universe. Predictive programming, all a factor as well. Flat Bob says they didn't put it in the Bible because it names them. That, and it tells you what the earth is and how the luminaries work. South to West says weird stuff. Oh, we're just getting started here. Plotchy Podcast says, I would add that the flat earth versus globe earth debate is already 100% settled because there is a new method of the celestial theodolite that works with time angles and occlusions of celestial objects, which are physical events. It shows that there is no physical change in the elevation of celestial objects, which would not be possible on a globe. Well, unless we're living in a simulation. Okay, let's continue here. So I think this is where a reasonable person should start asking questions. Why are the angels broken down into military units? Were they really heading down just for the women, or did they have something else in mind? I think they sure did have alternate plans, and the women were not part of those plans. That is curious, though. Yeah, like, yeah. 6. The purpose of the earth. This is where I'm going to inject a little bit of Zechariah Sitchin's Anunnaki, for in my opinion, the gist of the story explains the purpose of the earth enclosure. And again, when we're keeping shills and controlled ops and all of this in mind, because there's a lot of criticism of Zechariah Sitchin and his purpose, but is it possible some of these either controlled shills, gatekeepers, etc., they do let out a little bit of the truth as part of the op? So let's not fall for genetic logical fallacies where we're going to just dismiss everything they say outright because they might not be a trustworthy individual. That doesn't mean what they're saying isn't true or part of what they're saying. According to Sitchin, the Anunnaki genetically engineered Homo erectus to create modern humans to work as their slaves. Anunnaki would be equal to the same military scientific corps mentioned in Bullet 5, which we just went over. And this is basically it. The Earth was created as a farm. Whether it was created to play a strategy game, to mine gold, as an experiment, or to harvest genetic material is irrelevant for the purpose of this article. Also, let's just do a quick thought experiment. Let's say someone creates some kind of terrarium, ant farm, or whatever. Is it possible that other entities other than the creator, let's say the creator leaves it unattended for whatever period of time, as we understand time, if time is even real, other entities could stumble upon this terrarium and enact their own plans on it? Whether or not they're more powerful than the original creator, perhaps they're not. Then the original creator comes back and says, well, what the heck are you doing? This is my terrarium. And how would we ever know any of that? But obviously, coincidence theorists, they're just, in their spamming of false dichotomies, they can't consider any of these possibilities, or there could be more than one thing going on here. Seven, two sins. Here we look at the wrong deeds done by the Watcher class battalion of angels to be banished from heaven, and at the sins committed by the early mankind to warrant the great deluge, aka biblical flood. The angels' wrongdoings in the Bible came to earth and did what they did. They fell. The book of Enoch, when they, the Watcher class angels, took wives, each choosing for himself who they began to approach and with whom they cohabitated, teaching them sorcery, incantation, and the dividing of roots and trees. The women conceiving brought forth giants, whose stature was each 300 cubits, which is 150 yards, allegedly, according to these translations. Book of Enoch, instance 2. Moreover, Azazel taught men to make swords, knives, shields, breastplates, fabrication of mirrors, and the workmanship of bracelets and ornaments, the use of paint, the beautifying of the eyebrows, the use of stones of every valuable and select kind, and all sorts of dyes, so that the world became altered. And I believe Azazel is also the used in one of the Exorcist movies, that's a curious name to use. Amazarach taught all the sorcerers and dividers of roots. Armors taught the solution of sorcery. Barkael taught the observers of the stars. Akibil taught signs. Tamiel taught astronomy. Azaradel taught the motion of the moon. But, and men being destroyed cried out, and their voice reached to heaven. But and men being destroyed cried out, their voice reached to heaven. Book of Enoch, instance 3. The name of the first is Yakun. It was who seduced all the sons of the holy angels, causing them to descend on the earth, led astray the offspring of men. The name of the second is Jezebel, who pointed out evil counsel to the sons of the holy angels, who induced them to corrupt their bodies by generating mankind. Generating mankind, so they're corrupted by generating mankind. The name of the third is Gadriel. He discovered every stroke of death to the children of men. He seduced Eve and discovered to the children of men the instruments of death, the coat of mail, the shield, the sword for slaughter, every instrument of death to the children of men. From his hand were these things derived to them who dwell upon the earth from that period forever. The name of the fourth is Penemu. He discovered to the children of men bitterness and sweetness, and pointed out to them every secret of their wisdom. He taught men to understand writing and the use of ink and paper. Therefore numerous have been those who have gone astray from every period of the world even to this day. For men were not born for this, thus with pen and with ink to confirm their faith, since they were not created except that, like the angels, they might remain righteous and pure. Nor would death, which destroys everything, have affected them, but by their knowledge they perish, and by this also its power consumes them. The name of the fifth is Kaziade. He discovered to the children of men every wicked stroke of spirits and of demons, the stroke of the embryo in the womb to diminish it, the stroke of the spirit by the bite of the serpent, and the stroke which is given in the midday by the offspring to the serpent, the name of which is Tabaet. It's curious that the Marvel Universe also has a Tabayet, a fallen angel. In Enochian and Hebrew lore, Tabayet is a demon chief of tens associated with chaos. It appears one of the Watcher class angels' sins was in doing this to mankind, gave them wisdom and ability to think. Maybe tuned up humans' brain genetically, educated mankind in various fields of sciences, provided mankind with the same weapons as the gods, scientists, soldiers. So the weapon capabilities could probably be borrowed from the Mahabharata, which includes Vimana and all of these advanced weapons. So supposedly the Mahabharata, depending on the translations, could have possibly been hundreds of thousands of years ago. So if that's not describing the same events, then perhaps that's just from several resets prior. Supposedly there are several ages of mankind. This would be the 7th or 8th age of mankind. Possibly the 9th. I mean, there's all types of different translations, but this definitely, I don't think there's any that claims this is the first age, which would have followed by the first reset. So if this is the 7th, 8th, or whatever, perhaps some of these stories really are ancient, but which are which? And we will be trying to decipher that as well. So another possibility here is that they scientifically provided mankind with immortality. Possibly. So there's a few, this is an interesting one as well. Some believe if this was done in the time of Atlantis, you have Atlantean survivors that had this tech, and now one or two resets later, that has been lost, but it might be retained. Like Saint Germain, some people believe that's an immortal and was around for hundreds and hundreds of years. Obviously Methuselah and all of these others. If they were given some kind of tech, not necessarily genetic mutation that allowed them to live forever. Or perhaps all humans from this point on can live forever, but there's something preventing us from utilizing this in our DNA code. Or as a result of the last cataclysm, whether it was the biblical Great Flood or not, in the last reset completely changed the composition of Earth, both physically and specifically chemistry-wise, which causes increased oxidation of human cells. So if the atmosphere or whatever oxygen rate, the chemical ratios in the air were changed, that humans would have a much shorter lifestyle, possibly as some kind of punishment for something as well. But perhaps there's also a way to get around that if you have the knowledge to do that. So there was a mutiny in the sky. Maybe these 200 angels were the liberals of the distant past. They came down and for whatever reason decided to tune up mankind to the point of making them immortal, smart, and dangerous. The initial scientists' intent for the mankind was to remain righteous and pure, also known as dumb, stupid, obedient, and illiterate on the genetic level. The wrongdoings of mankind in the Bible, Genesis 6:5, and God saw that the wickedness of men was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. Genesis 6:11, the earth was corrupt before God, and the earth was filled with violence. 6:13, God said unto Noah, the end of all flesh is come before me, for the earth is filled with violence through them, and behold, I will destroy them with the earth. The book of Enoch. Nothing really was done wrong by mankind itself, but some of the genetic improvements or experiments had gone wrong. The Nephilim giants devoured all which the labor of men produced until it became impossible to feed them. When they turned themselves against men in order to devour them, and began to injure bird, beasts, reptiles, and fishes, to eat their flesh one after another, and to drink their blood, then the earth reproved the unrighteous. So that's actually kind of curious. And I'm not going to go into all of the evidence of giants. I did one podcast on that before, but just a basic search of just giant doorways, giant swords, giant books. Again, we have no idea what the true timeline really is. Perhaps these are just the remaining offspring from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 resets ago. Or perhaps all of these events are from the previous reset. Conclusion, it is possible from the above that there were at least 4 or 5 types of beings on Earth at the time. Genetically improved educated men, including educated original ones but not modified. Giants, aka Nephilim, improvement gone wrong. I also wouldn't necessarily group the giants and the Nephilim together. That might be a reductive logic fallacies. Chimeras of various kind, humans mixed with animals, fishes, reptiles, etc. And the Watcher class angels, aka the split-off creators. And also, just a quick aside here. If this is all true and there were genetic experiments in the past on man and beast and etc. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 resets prior, is that what Bigfoot is? Some people think the Bigfoot are the Nephilim. Perhaps they are, perhaps they aren't. Perhaps they're just a genetic experiment. Perhaps that's what all monsters are. All these monsters or creatures are genetic experiments of the past. Most of them were probably hunted down and killed, possibly dragons as well. But perhaps a few survived, and over the past 100 years, sightings get fewer and fewer. A lot of coincidence theorists, again, they just ignore the possibility of an interdimensional angle, which, again, let's not fall false dichotomies, that may be at play as well, depending on what kind of technologies we're talking about here, what kind of realm this is, which, I mean, nobody really knows, obviously. So, Lord Zed says, I've been watching a lot of Smurfs lately. There's gnomes and Smurfs. That stuff is going on. Locksmart says, match this info with Tellinger stuff. Fascinating. This is going to actually overlap a lot. And so, Lord Zed says, happy Turkey Day. Yeah, I did a podcast on the true history of that. and the massacres that occurred. But anyway, and we're going to come in some major mind shocks regarding Native Americans and Tartaria, so we'll be getting there too. But all of these monsters and creatures, if these are genetic experiments of the past, it would be expected that there would be fewer and fewer as they were exterminated throughout the years. So even now everybody's got a cell phone. Even if they weren't exterminated and killed, they could have naturally died out as more and more of the world became populated or repopulated. Perhaps less and less wild areas, although there's still plenty for some to survive. Whether the angels' intentions were good or bad, everything turned into a bloodbath, with the Nephilim annihilating the improved mankind. This began to, quote, injure birds, beasts, reptiles, and fishes. Sounds pretty disturbing. I have doubt we are talking about literal injuring and eating here. I think we have these smart, gigantic, semi-angelic beings being genetically modifying the mankind as well, only they added some animal DNA and started making different chimera-type monsters with human brains. Something like this. Here's the image that Corbin Dallas used here. But yeah, I've talked about this relating to the Greeks. Perhaps we shouldn't even call them the ancient Greeks, but the Greeks. Centaurs, minotaurs, all of these. If you haven't seen something like, I mentioned this with a color. Try to imagine a color that doesn't exist. Are they really creating myths and legends and using their imagination, or are they describing things that already exist? And I've actually mentioned this, I forget which episode I talked about this, but one of the reasons a lot of religious or spiritual systems do not advocate eating pork is that pig still has human DNA in it from some of these experiments in the past. Obviously, they could also hold some kind of bloodborne disease, but yeah, perhaps there's a cannibalistic aspect to it from some of these genetic experiments of the past. Jubilees 724, and after this they sinned against the beasts and birds and all that moves and walks on the earth, and much blood was shed on the earth, and every imagination and desire of men imagined vanity and evil continually. Corbin Dallas' opinion on the above point: essentially we had this Skylab which created our Earth, its environment, humans, and creatures. The Skylab was naturally situated outside of the Earth enclosure, dome, if you will, but the lab staff was able to visit and inspect work as needed. This Skylab had a strict hierarchy where God was the top official. Whether this God was sole commando or some sort of board of directors is irrelevant. God was in charge of the operations. They had multiple departments in charge of various areas of development. Both scientific and military capabilities can both be traced. A group of the Skylab rogue scientists and soldiers, the fallen angels, decided to break protocol. They went into the Earth enclosure and altered the originally designed humans. I doubt that they went down to have intercourse due to the daughters of men being fair. There was clearly a discussion between some Yaza and his subordinates on whether to proceed with the plan and conduct this incursion or not. We will never find out whether fallen angels were some bleeding hearts who could not stand this awful social injustice suffered by their creation, or want to advance some unauthorized scientific ideas of their own. These events took place in the days of Jared. They came down and introduced their own genetic and other ideas into an existing ecosystem where everything was designed to code. Among everything else, rogue scientists, aka fallen angels, artificially inseminated Earth women, which led to the emergence of modified humans, aka Nephilim. And also, just quick asides here, virgin births, etc. Could that be artificial insemination unknown to the virgin woman being manipulated by some kind of, Skylab employee, given this analogy here? And furthermore, like, how much of this is conflated with Lucifer, the light bringer? And of course, Lucifer and Satan technically might not be the same entity. And Lucifer, the torchbearer, the light bringer, the illuminator, bringing the light, could be wisdom or knowledge in general, not literal light. Although could also be electricity, right? Could be some kind of actual literal light, electricity, technology, technological knowledge as well. So, okay, the actions of the fallen angels lead to their improved creations, Nephilim and educated original humans, to develop creatures of their own. They sinned against the beasts and the birds and all that moves and walks on earth. Genetic modifications continued and human-animal hybrids were introduced. The earth ended up with a bunch of weird, hungry creatures running around. And much blood was shed on earth. Every imagination, desire of men imagined vanity and evil continually. Hence we get Genesis 6:11 and 6:12. Now the earth was corrupt in God's sight, and the earth was filled with violence. And God saw the earth, and behold, it was corrupt, for all flesh had corrupted their way on the earth. Some scholars believe that there could have been about 750 million people at the time of the flood. However, given the extremely long lifespans prior to the flood, the growth rate could have been much higher. Increasing the rate by just 0.001 would put the population at close to 4 billion at the flood. And obviously, I do need to do a separate podcast just on world populations, because that's a really tough one. Duck and Felonies brings up Frankenstein. Yeah, Frankenstein. What is that telling us? Well, also, I wanted to make this point later, but I'll make it now. A lot of what's in the media, in someone's consciousness, like they think they're coming up with an idea for a movie or a book, and let's say it's organic. But what if that's coming from some kind of genetic memory or cosmic consciousness? And it's something that actually happened in the past. Coincidence theorists will never consider that. Somehow Noah ended up being the only righteous, aka genetically pure human on earth. We could probably add Noah's wife and 3 sons to the list of genetically pure people. Whether the wives of his sons were genetically pure is questionable. The mutineers, the fallen angels, aka rogue scientists and soldiers, were sentenced to life in prison, banished from heaven, which could mean no possibility of return to their original habitat. The angels who sinned, Peter and Jude say, were cast down to Tartarus. And again, the curiosity of Tartarus, Tartaria, where they are bound until God judges them. Decide for yourself whether we have cross-referencing of the ancient Greek titans here. And again, what I found curious, I did a whole episode on this in the Altered History series. The golden age of man was supposedly under the Titans. If the Titans are these fallen angels, perhaps there's something there. And then there was the defeat of the Titans. And the Titans were imprisoned under guard in Tartarus. Nephilims lost their physical bodies due to death. Their souls, and AI here, which is kind of interesting that Corbin Dallas adds AI to Nephilim's souls, were not designed to return, recycle, or do whatever the original scientific design prescribed souls to do. Allegedly, their souls ended up being demons and such. This part is outside my little article here. You are welcome to research yourself. I'm going to drop a few theories here. Perhaps the Nephilim. Okay, if this truly is the Nephilim, I'm not sold on these all being the same entities. I think it's possible there's a lot of different things going on here. But the Nephilim definitely has a negative connotation, whereas if they're not, or maybe some of the fallen angels were the Nephilim, but in general, if the fallen angels came down to help mankind, were banished by Skylab, can they only either reincarnate as demons or possibly communicate through demons? And they want vengeance on Skylab. And they manipulate mankind to that end because they're either bitter or whatever. They have thousands, or again, it might not even be thousands of years. We're talking about hundreds of years here. And they want to somehow get back at Skylab and use humans to do so? Or are simply, if demons are some kind of interdimensional or some kind of other kind entities, did the knowledge of how to communicate with them given by the fallen angels simply open up doorways, and now these other demons, perhaps the fallen angels don't necessarily, I mean, it's kind of tough to think about it, but the fallen angels might not necessarily want or condone any of these demons doing anything, but perhaps they're powerless to stop it in their current incantation? I don't know. Something to think about. These might all be different entities, though. But the story of Tartarus and Tartary is interesting. We also have, if we also look at some of these Hollow Earth theories, if they're banished to Tartarus, cast down to this prison of Tartarus, possibly in Hollow Earth, they could theoretically still have all these advanced technologies that they could be sharing with other humans if there are other human civilizations in Hollow Earth. So let's not forget all about Hollow Earth here. Let's continue here. We have to read between the lines. You do not run around messing with genetics while having a stone axe attached to your lion cloth. It was a highly educated society which killed itself off with their own inventions and genetic experiments. They most likely had everything we have today. Infinity. Their technology had to be outside of anything we can possibly imagine. Science fiction on drugs comes to mind. The reason they were so advanced was due to them receiving all the tech and knowledge from those Skylab gods who created them and their environment. They could create a bio-robot, introduce mind intelligence, morals, and feelings into it. They could make it look whatever they wanted it to look, out of the material of their choice, and their own creations put an end to the world via the actual Skylab scratching the project to start it over. So here's some visual aids here. So most people think that the pre-flood world was some primitive world that looked something like this. Now what if in actuality, instead of being some primitive world like this, it was actually some kind of super advanced technological world like something out of Star Wars? Let's leave everybody to ponder that for a moment. And I've said this before, Noah's Ark might have been some kind of genetic data bank or whatever if they had more advanced techs. A lot of coincidence theorist, atheist goofs, they can't consider that the Ark could have been anything other than a wooden ship. Once again, we can only guess the purpose of the Earth enclosure creation, whether someone out there runs creating worlds for expletive and giggles, or they create worlds to farm for goodies, is irrelevant for the purpose of this article. I deliberately called it an enclosure, for I do not believe for a second that we know what the shape of our so-called planet is. We have been told, but we have never been shown the true Earth. I think we live in an artificially limited space and there are other worlds out there, but these worlds have nothing to do with our traditional understanding of space, planets, and stars. This is just my opinion. 8. Operation Great Flood. Reset the biblical deluge. God said to Noah, I have determined to make an end for all flesh, for the earth is filled with violence through them. Behold, I will destroy them with the earth. Most everything on earth was genetically corrupt. I think there were other righteous, aka genetically pure individuals on earth, yet someone with enough authority to wipe out everything on earth. God was not powerful enough to say, puff, I wish all the impurity to vanish. Questioning God's capabilities is blasphemous, but we have to be real instead of hiding behind the divine intent excuses. The general picture of Noah and his ark coming to mind should probably look something like this. At the same time, if there was ever such thing as Noah's Ark, my suggested technology levels at the time, it would look similar to this craft. And again, if who's to say the Bible wasn't changed or whatever, if after the flood all of the tech was wiped out as well, they would be starting over with sticks and stones. Which actually, if you think about it, kind of makes sense, because even now there's uncontacted tribes that are still on that sticks and stones level. So why wouldn't that have been the same case for every previous reset? So if the means by which the Great Flood happening was simply by cracking the dome and letting the waters from above just kind of overtake the earth, some kind of heavily fortified advanced tech submarine, that would be the way to go to survive such an event, would it not? And furthermore, there's theories that the Great Flood didn't actually wipe everybody out. Possibly not even all the giants, Nephilim, whatever. So there could be survivors either in underground cities, because it kind of seems, I wonder if there was wisdom from previous resets that survived, if this wasn't the first reset. So they knew, so all of these ancient, if they're ancient, underground cities and tunnels everywhere, people somehow survived in all areas of the world. There were some survivors, and civilization kind of restarted in many different areas. So there's the Great Eastern Leviathan, which was an 1854-59 ship, which is quite curious. Not bad technology. And then Corbin Dallas has said what I have been saying for a very long time, that Noah's Ark might be a data bank. And it simply was the DNA of all of the uncorrupted animals on Earth. One way or another, there was an event of enormous magnitude and importance. In scriptures, other religions, and myths, it became known as the Great Flood or Deluge. This event allegedly killed everything on our earth enclosure. Whether it did or did not, we will hardly find out. The Bible says it did. As far as other sources go, I'm not that sure. Everything above was just my paraphrasing and personal understanding of the texts and interpretations of the non-mainstream biblical researchers. What follows below are thoughts of my own, and they will sound pretty wild, but give me a chance here. 9. BC or BCE never existed, ? It's funny and sad how our political correctness turned BC, times before Christ, into BCE, times before Common Era. Either way, they mean the exact same thing. I always wondered why we count our years from the birth of Christ and what this common era really was. Being a supporter of the views expressed by Anatoly Fomenko, this count-off date was not making any sense. So far, not a single person was able to mathematically disprove Mr. Fomenko's calculations, and if you're not aware of Anatoly Fomenko and the new chronology, check out the Altered History series on MINDSHOCK. I go over all of that. Claude Adams says, what's the bare minimum you would need to preserve a DNA sample for a few months? Well, it depends what kind of technology you're using, right? I mean, if you're using some kind of advanced tech, perhaps some kind of freezing technology, who knows? I mean, it could be easy. Jenna Ferrari says, there are floating ships masked by clouds. I've seen them in Mexico. Yeah, I've gone over that on a few podcasts as well, all the airships. So, Fomenko claims Jesus Christ was born in 1053 AD and crucified in 1086 AD, which is kind of curious saying AD with that, but that's the adjusted Fomenko date. Fomenko was labeled by historians as a pseudoscientist. I am talking about the same narrative supporting individuals, the likes of which gave us the below discovery. 16, so there's a whole bunch of discoveries here. Okay, I didn't know this was this fake. So, well, there's no way. This has got to be an Illuminati humiliation ritual. Oh, man. These look so fake. Okay, so officially, so all the scientism bootlickers, the authority-worshipping cultists, according to their puppeteers that they believe, these are ancient Egyptian socks. Made in 300 AD, between 349 AD in Egypt. I mean, look at the stitching. That's weird. So these are 1600-year-old Egyptian stocks, according to the mainstream narrative. That's kind of weird. They almost look like they're made for reptilians. Also, these are 3,000-year-old Chinese talking pants. I saw something about this before, too. I don't know, does those look thousands of years old? 3,000 years? Apparently there's 2 sets of these as well. They were found in China 2014 in tombs. It's kind of weird. Here's a 5,500-year shoe. And authority-worshipping cultists, they're so devout in their faith, they would never question the technology of these dating methods. They just blindly believe because their faith is so strong in the establishment. Flat Bob says, so the Levi's come from the tribe of Levi. So this is what authority-worshipping cultists bootleg. They're literally bootlegging this. That these are 5,000 years old. 5,500-year-old leather shoes. And now I saw a little bit about this as well. Apparently this is a 14,000-year-old piece of bread. I mean, who believes the dates here? So apparently, so this is an archaeobotanist from the University of Copenhagen. Apparently found this, and apparently the scientism has dated this to 14,000, and nobody questions the dating methods on any of these either. All these alleged skeptics, they're never skeptical to bootlick the dogma of the establishment. They're authority-worshipping cultist bootlickers. They just swallow all the dogma whole without even considering the possibility that these scientism priests, that the technology is fallible. They don't even question. They're the opposite of skeptics. Jennifer Ari says, no one believes those dates. Well, I mean, this is all reported in all modern so-called scientific literature and newspaper. I mean, these are all, I'm not going to bring up all the articles here. Anybody can find them. This is all mainstream narrative. This is all official. So, anyway, Corbin Dallas doesn't have a lot of respect for these folks that claim these things, or the folks that just believe this, labeled by some kind of lying historians who are dumber than some semi-educated barbarians of the past. I call these historians liars because they are incapable of putting their actions where their mouths are. I call them dumb because they cannot do what uneducated barbarians of the distant past could. Well, we don't know how distant, right? Okay, according to Fomenko, who figured out that historical debit reality does not match historical credit narrative. Jesus Christ died in 1053 AD. I think at a later time he fine-tuned his dates to 1152 AD with the date of death 1185 AD. And again, he's using just observations of astronomical events. Celestial events is what Fomenko did. And I still don't know, again, how Fomenko figured it all out. And I'm not sure he's accurate either, because there's so many different types of Jesus figures with the same story. I went over all this in the Altered History series. You can check all that out. So, with the above in mind, our today's year, so he wrote this article in 2019, was not making any sense with regard to the birth date of Jesus. It should be more like the year 867. Hence, we have this dilemma of 1,000 added years with all those I's, L's, J's in the mix. Corbin Dallas's thoughts: Jesus Christ was most definitely one of the most important figures in the history of mankind, yet his sacrifices are hardly more important than the end result of Genesis 1. Yet, miserly humans totally disrespected the Creator and started to count the years from the birth of Christ. To me, it was plausible at best. A few months ago, I ran into the following book. This is just one example. For it was well known that the Great Flood allegedly happened in the year 1656, after God created the earth. There are plenty of similar books like the ones below, dated 1749. So this is from the Universal Magazine of Knowledge and Pleasure. So let's see what this receipt holds here. Some kind of like encyclopedic magazine or something. And here is the page in question. Page 145. You promised to give me a history of Noah's flood. I am prepared to oblige you in this inquiry. You may remember that I then, Alpha, told you that this flood happened in the year of the world 1656. A flood that overspread the whole face of the earth from north to south, from east to west. Waters overtopped the highest mountains. For the rains appointed to execute the judgment of God defended after an unusual manner, which joined to the waters of the great deep commanded. I'm assuming that F is an H. Also to rush from their fountains, and also Russians, ruffians, right? That's one that I keep going back to. Brought the general devastation and destruction upon the earth and all things thereon. No living creature except those reserved by God's appointment under the care of Noah, nor any of the human species but Noah's family being able to escape the divine vengeance. After their waters had raged for some time upon the earth, they began to drain away and to retire into their proper channels and caverns of the earth, so that the mountains and then the fields once more appeared dry. And is the mud flood a result? Is it simply the great flood because all the water and dirt created mud? The whole okay, so, and appeared dry, and the whole habitable world presented itself in the form and shape we now enjoy it, and was again peopled and flocked with every living creature by the race of mankind of animals, which God's wonderful providence had preferred for this purpose of the ark built by Noah according to his directions. This is the history of the greatest event that ever happened in the world, and the greatest revolution, and the greatest change in nature. Revolution, like political? I cannot comprehend how this flood couldn't be universal. Where would the water come from? How could Noah make an ark spacious, capacious enough to hold and preserve all sorts of animals? I do not wonder at all that you, who cannot be expected to judge otherwise than by appearance, should doubt the truth of the universal flood, when so many learned men have tired their brains in pursuit of arguments to overthrow it, or at least to confine its extent with some certain districts or countries. I'm guessing that's districts. Some will not allow its extent beyond the confines and neighboring regions of Judea. Others allow it to drown all the tract of land which lies between the Persian, Caspian, Euxine, and Mediterranean seas. And they say, come nearest to the Mophate account, certain the flood within the continent of Aphia, which objections to mankind immediately after the flood, which otherwise would have been, but this is barely denying a matter of fact to get over difficulty above their comprehension, for it is easy to show that this flood was universal. It's show that this flood is universal in consent as well as its effects. I could be glad to hear by what means you prove it to be. The scriptures alone put this matter out of all doubt to those that are not so wife in their own conceits as to be submitting their understandings to what God has revealed. For they tell us explicitly that all the high hills under the whole heavens were covered by waters. All died, moved upon the earth, except Noah and those that were with him in the ark. Okay, so just Bible quotations here. So quite interesting that the year given here is 1656. That's quite curious. Not 1666, but 1656. Oh, someone in the chat is asking Beelzebub, you want the breakdown of the debunking of Einstein's relativity? I'll drop that in the chat here. Yeah. Somewhat relevant here, but not exactly. Okay. Yeah, I just dropped it in the chat, Flatbob. Okay. So, the year 1656. Seeing the year 1656 in the setting of a book that was the first time when certain thoughts started to form. What if we do not count from Christ? What if we count from the creation of the earth by Skylab? If Jesus Christ was not born 2,000 years ago, why do we count from the BC AD split? In my opinion, the above 1749 book cutout was not really done in 1749. Well, it was, but that 1749 was not the one which was supposed to come 93 years after 1656. This 1749 falls into the Mr. J.J. Scalinger's dating system, which was corrupt from the very beginning. It was corrupt enough to be questioned by people like Isaac Newton, or so the narrative says. Scaliger himself placed his lifespan into the 1540-1609 AD range. I think this date range was after the 1656 flood, but not by much. It is important to understand that our time frames are seriously messed with. We have double, triple, and quadruple time restarts between 1656 and 1657. Scaliger defined 976 and 977, or 1343 and 1344 could be any given number of years. The best way to explain it was to be us living in 2019, waking up tomorrow, and it is 1927 all over again. This makes all the years in between disappear. Simply stick a couple of industrial revolutions between 1927 and 1947 and keep on going with fake history. While my dating gymnastics have to be pretty confusing at the moment, I hope you will develop a better understanding as we move along. So it says here that this was written in 1749, but this is not necessarily the 1749 that is our 1749. Is everybody following here? So if this is less than or this is approximately 100 years, written 100 years after the Great Flood, what year is it now? So is this only, I mean, it's kind of hard to figure this out, right? Because if there's so many restarts and date changes, years disappearing, years being added, and years mistranslated, that's a problem. That's a problem. Antediluvian. The antediluvian, alternatively pre-diluvian or pre-flood period, is the time period referred to in the Bible between the fall of humans and the Genesis flood narrative in the biblical cosmology. The term found its way into early geology and science in the late Victorian era. Colloquially, the term is used to refer to any ancient and murky period. We have this, so Google Ngram Viewer allows us to see when this or that language specific word was introduced into print. So this is a very interesting tool here. And so let's look at this now. So I'll just zoom in a little bit here so people can see the dates on when this word was used, how often this word is used in print. Between 1500 and 2000. Antediluvian. What percentage? Wow, that's a pretty interesting spike here. 1650, and then not again for a few decades. And then not so much now. This is very interesting, is it not? So, the introduction of the word in the mid-1600s. Huh. So, Wikipedia is, well, the fact that Wikipedia is lying is not, is not a surprise to anybody. So apparently the term found its way in the late Victorian era. The Victorian era was from 1830s until 1901, Queen Victoria's reign. We need to remember that according to the narrative, book printing in Europe started in 1455. Here's another interesting graphic here. Production of printed books per half century in the thousands of books from between 1454 and 1800, also classified by country here. So look at the books being printed here. Obviously a massive increase. You can see, okay, so this is what the official narrative, anyway, is. So the tool allows us to see that the use of the word antediluvian started way before the 1800s. From this perspective, we have to be suspicious as why the official narrative wants us to think otherwise. Additionally, we can see that the word antediluvian is placed within the mid-1600s range. And I'm actually going to finish the part here. We'll be continuing this in the next part. But this is just the beginning. This is just the first MINDSHOCK here. And major receipts will be incoming as follows. This is a new series, obviously, The Real History of the World. I believe an unprecedented look at compiling the most comprehensive analysis of all known history. And yeah, plenty more to come. So thanks again, everybody, for joining us here. I will try to put these out in a timely fashion. I know sometimes these lives are not very timely in these series, but I will do my best to keep it short periods between each part. Thanks again, everybody, for joining us. If you want to help support the podcast, you can donate to our PayPal. Help Logic and Reason return to a world where it is quickly going extinct. This is Bruce McGuire signing off. Catch you guys next time.